You know it's this. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowing like sis. Then it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look up better. Put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the second part of What If Deku Meets Castlevania. Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of the gentleman with a mustache on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Dracula stared at the computer screen with his hand to his mouth in contemplation. He looked at the list of interns offered to his students and kept looking at Midoriya's count. It was after class and Dracula was in the teacher's lounge, trying to figure out why Midoriya had seemingly lost all his internship offers. Shoto's little interruption was stuck in his mind. Was this sabotage? That's what was confirmed. But the real question was, who did it? A hand slid onto his shoulder, making Dracula look behind to see Midnight. She didn't have her SNSL smirk on her face. She frowned slightly at him. What's wrong, Vlad? Your usual more talkative. Dracula looked back at the screen and released a breath. Someone sabotaged Midoriya's internship offers. He had the highest count in my class and then they just disappeared. It is not even a glitch. Something else is at play. Midnight looked at the screen before sighing and shaking her head. Poor boy. He did so well in the tournament. Especially against Todoroki, even if it was extremely dangerous. Todoroki, Todoroki. Todoroki. Click. There it was. Dracula's eyes widened as he finally realized it. He stood up and started walking out of the teacher's lounge, which left a very confused Midnight behind. Dracula marched to the principal's office and was about to knock on the door when the little rat said, "Come on in, Vlad." He sighed as he slid the door open and walked into the office where he sat down on one of the two empty chairs. "I assume you figured out who sabotaged young Midoriya's offers?" Nizu asked politely with his paws intertwined together. Dracula looked at him with a flat look that hid furious rage. "You and I both know who did this." "Indeed. What do you intend to do about it?" Principal Nizu asked before taking a sip of his tea. The king of vampires closed his eyes and took a deep breath to calm himself. This did nothing as he declared through grit teeth. "I won't kill him. I'm going to destroy him. I'm going to ruin him." Nizu had a sadistic grin that showcased his sharp teeth as he cackled lightly. "Excellent. We will begin shortly, but for now, you need to work on getting young Midoriya an internship." Dracula took a deep breath and finally felt calm before nodding and standing up. "I'll see if I can call in a few favors." He walked out of Nizu's office and fished his phone out of his coat. He went to his contact list and searched for one in particular. Cafeteria. Ace was having a rather difficult time trying to handle chopsticks. He could not properly close them enough to catch some of the rice in the bowl. "I say, at this point I won't even be able to eat before our next class." Scarlet chuckled. "All it takes is a little practice, dear." One of her ears flicked as she took a bite of her sushi. Momo had eyes of pity before speaking. "Excuse me, Ace. I can show you, if you'd like." The plague doctor student looked up at and nodded. "Oh, would you please? I'm rather starving." So Momo showed Ace the proper finger placement and after a few tries, the card dealer got a good grasp on the chopsticks. "Oh, you're a bloody godsend, Miss Yayarozu," he exclaimed, which made her blush at the compliment. He lifted the mask up slightly, not so everyone can see his mouth, but he could put the rice in his mouth. He pulled the mask back down. Jiro looked at Ace and asked, "So Motorhead, huh? Any other music you like?" Ace swallowed the rice and answered, "Oh, I enjoy many types of music, but I find rock to be my favorite." Jiro felt a smile creep up on her face. "I think we're going to be good friends." Momo turned her head to Scarlet and asked, "Tell me, how is France?" The redhead student pursed her lips before asking, "Are any of you familiar with what's happening outside in the world?" Ace answered, "From what I've been hearing, Britain has seen a complete stop in villain activity." "But that's good, isn't it?" Jiro asked while twirling an earphone jack around her finger. Ace shook his head, the beak shaking slightly. "No. All the known villains that are being searched for have disappeared. It's gotten the heroes on high alert in London. That's why my parents wanted me to transfer to here." "I see, and what is happening in France?" Momo asked, turning her head back to Scarlet, who sighed. "There have been riots and villain attacks increasing in the last 2 months. Even with heroes transferring from all over the world to help deal with it, it's not enough. It's also why I was transferred to UA." Ace hummed and questioned, "Any possibility there is a link?" Scarlet shook her head, "I do not know. I just know it is only getting worse there." "I'm sorry to hear about it, Scarlet," Jiro said with sympathetic eyes. Scarlet shook her head, her colored hair bobbing with the movement as she spoke. "Anyway, I do not wish to sour the rest of the day. Please tell me about your classmates." Ace nodded, "Yes, I too wish to learn more about them." So as they conversed, Midoriya poked his rice with his chopsticks as Achako looked at him with sympathy. "Deku? You okay?" Midoriya blinked before looking at her. "Oh, yeah, I'm okay." Hitoshi, whom sat in front of Midoriya, raised an eyebrow. "Really? I wouldn't call having your offers taken away from you being okay." Tsu nudged him, "Be a little nicer, will you?" He flushed and rubbed the back of his head. "Right. Sorry, Midoriya." The green bean shook his head. "It's all right, Hitoshi. It's just. Did I do something wrong?" Achako shook her head. "No, Deku. You didn't do anything wrong. Our teacher will get it all fixed." Midoriya sighed. "Hey Uraraka, can you just call me Midoriya from now on?" She blinked and asked, "Huh? How come? I thought you said it was fine." He sat up a little straighter and replied, "Yeah, I did. But after bakugou was expelled, I had a lot to think about. I almost made Deku my hero name, just to show that I could do it, but I'd rather let that name die and move on." Achako flushed. "You're right, sorry, Midoriya. I'm glad you're moving on from that name, Midoriya." "Karo," Tsu said, to which Hitoshi was confused. "Sorry, can someone explain what you guys are talking about?" "Oh, sorry, Hitoshi. You see, one of the students that was expelled from our class was rather brutal. I'd known him since I was 2 years old. But he started bullying me when he got his quirk at 4 years old. He'd been doing it for years. All the way up until the end of middle school. He always called me Deku, calling me useless. He always wanted to put me in my place." Midoriya said, with flashes of bakugou's explosions hitting his face making him shake slightly. Hitoshi snarled, "That scumbag." Tsu asked with a finger to her lips, "But Midoriya, why didn't you ever defend yourself?" Midoriya shook his head slightly to shake off the bad memories and looked at the frog student. "I didn't want to exacerbate the situation even further." Hitoshi leaned back and allowed himself a small smile. "Well, you're a lot braver than I am. I would have tried beating the CRP out of him. Well, at least he's gone now. Now you don't have to worry about him anymore." Achako said, a little cheery, but it didn't help Midoriya. "You're wrong. He's not gone." Tears started to drip down his cheeks. Hitoshi watched and felt uncomfortable as he didn't know what to do to comfort him, but Achako wrapped her arms around him, as did Tsu. Hitoshi put his hand on his shoulder awkwardly to try and help him. "Hey, can I sit here with you guys?" A female voice asked from the left, to which everyone looked up to see Himiko with a tray in her hands. "Oh hi." Midoriya said as he wiped his tears away and took a deep breath. "You're Teeps, right?" Himiko nodded, "Yep. But call me Himiko. Is it okay if I sit with you?" Midoriya, realizing he didn't answer her first question, jumped slightly. "Oh sorry. I didn't mean to keep you standing." "Yeah, it's okay." Himiko giggled and sat down next to Midoriya, much to the ire of Achako, but she managed to hide it. "Not from Tsu." Hitoshi asked Himiko, "Himiko, you wouldn't happen to be related to Vlad, would you?" She flushed and turned her head away a bit. "Yeah. But not by BLD. He adopted me." They were surprised by that, and Tsu asked, "How come you didn't try out at the entrance exam?" Himiko pursed her lips, "I'd rather not talk about it." Tsu tilted her head slightly, "Sorry." Himiko smiled and waved it off. "It's quite alright," she said before pulling out a flask and unscrewed the cap before taking a sip. Hitoshi blinked, "Tell me that isn't alcohol." Himiko shook her head and laughed nervously, "Oh no. It's nourishment. You see, my quirk allows me to shape-shift into the person I drink BLD from. However, one of the drawbacks to my quirk is that if I don't have a steady supply of BLD to drink, I kinda go a little cuckoo." Everyone thought about this news. "That's rather fascinating," Midoriya said, breaking the small bit of silence. Himiko's eyes widened before sparkling a bit. Thanks Midoriya." Dracula watched Himiko interact with Midoriya, Yurikaka, Hitoshi, and Tsuyu. He couldn't help but let a smile appear on his face to see his adoptive daughter getting along and start having friends. He walked up to the table and Himiko's eyes and teeth shined with the way she smiled, "Hi Dad." Dracula smiled and ruffled her hair slightly, "Hey there little Draculina. Making friends?" Himiko pouted about her hair but nodded, "Yep yep yep." The Vampire King had a bigger smile, "Good. I'm glad. I need to borrow Midoriya for a little bit." Midoriya managed to get out of the booth and followed Midoriya into the hallway. "Is there something wrong, Mr. Teeps?" No, Midoriya. I just came by to let you know, you have 2 offers. One is from a retired hero whom trained All Might and One for All. Midoriya's eyes widened as he stared up at him, What? How do you know? Dracula enjoyed seeing his reaction internally and simply smirked. I've known since before All Might debut. I was there when he received his injury from a villain 6 years ago. But right now is not the time for that. Midoriya's body still shook as he asked, who offered? Dracula answered, the rabbit hero, Miruko. Cue another scream from Midoriya, and Gran Torino. He was the one to train All Might many years ago. Midoriya was now excited. Miruko and the trainer of All Might. Dracula nodded, indeed. Now this comes down to you. Do you want to be trained into doing different fighting styles to help you, or learn how to properly utilize One for All? Give it time to think about. This is not a decision to make lightly, you understand. Midoriya's excitement died down slightly and nodded with a determined look on his face. Yes sir. The Vampire King nodded back and placed a hand on his shoulder, all right, now go back and enjoy your lunch. Midoriya walked back with light in his eyes. Such a tough decision to make. Which hero will he choose? Before anyone knew it, it was the day everyone was heading off to their internships. Dracula was rather proud to watch his students walk off to the trains heading to where their internships were located. After looking at the interns that were submitted to him, there were some that were questionable. At least in Dracula's opinion. Originally, Momo Yaoyorozu wanted to intern with Iwabumi. The Vampire King never liked the snake-haired hero because of her personality and preferred to advertise her own merchandise instead of working on saving people. He had some interactions with Iwabumi and each time, he nearly wanted to rip her head off. So he spoke to Momo about changing her internship. He offered her to intern with the R-rated hero, Midnight, which surprised the student, but she started to see why Midnight would work. And so Momo and Midnight were heading off to their train, not before the teacher kissed Dracula's cheek. Ace got an internship offer with the ninja hero, Edge Shot, which was rather exciting for the British exchange student. Himiko decided to take an internship with him as well. Scarlet Frost took an internship with the dragon hero, Ryukyu, to which Dracula believed to be a good choice for the French student. Yurikaka decided to go with Gunhead, which the teacher approved. She certainly needed combat experience. Tokoyami took the offer from Hawks, which would be something interesting to see the end result of. Ida went off to work with Manuel. That one was very confusing, that was until Dracula found where Manuel was stationed in Hosu City, where Ingenium was attacked and left paralyzed. Suddenly it all connected to why Ida went with such a minuscule hero. Vengeance. Even Midoriya was worried about Ida. Dracula pulled Midoriya aside and said for him to look after Ida, to which the green-haired student promised to keep tabs on him. Hitoshi scored an intern with the original Class 1A teacher, Shota Aizawa. Sooner after the sports festival, Eraserhead was released from the hospital. Dracula announced, the day before internships, that Aizawa retired from being a teacher at U.A and continue his underground hero work. While everyone didn't know him very much, they still wanted to thank him for teaching them and protecting them. So they all wrote in a card and sent it to him. Jiro took an intern with Present Mike, which was rather surprising, but because he also dealt with sound, she figured he could give her some tips and points on her quirk and fighting. One by one, his students took an internship with heroes of different calibers. Though the most surprising internship was Midoriya interning with the rabbit hero, Miruko. Dracula himself smiled internally at the choice because it would be a good stepping point to get Miruko to work with others. Dracula was an exception because of his brutality and sheer tenacity. Midoriya thought he could incorporate his quirk into a fighting style perfect for him. While he really wanted to meet the mentor of All Might, he believed he could benefit more from a fighter like Miruko. It was almost time, so Dracula had all his students gathered in front of him. Dracula instructed them. Now, be respectful and listen to your heroes as if I was the one speaking to you. Don't hesitate to call me if you have trouble or wish to leave early. Yes, sir. The class said in unison before bowing. Dracula smiled. Now, get to your trains, and be safe. One by one, the students dispersed towards the bullet trains reserved for the heroes in training. Little did some of them know, this week would change their lives. Forever. Things had gone rather smoothly for Midoriya. Oof. Midoriya said as he landed on the floor for the millionth time. Come on, Green Bean. Get up. Show me that heroic spirit Vlad is always talking about. Miruko said while raising her knee up and bringing her fists up. Midoriya grunted as he struggled to get up before pulling his fists up and said, I can do this all day. Miruko had her signature bloodthirsty grin, there it is. She shouted as Midoriya charged towards her with his fist cocked back. Ow. Midoriya moaned out as he held an ice pack to his left eye. Oh, quit your bitching, Green Bean. You lasted longer than Hawks by at least 5 minutes. Miruko said as she came out of her bedroom in shorts and a t-shirt. She was rubbing a towel against her platinum blonde hair. Midoriya rolled his neck and felt some satisfying pops happen. So, Miss Miruko, how did you meet Mr. Teeps? Miruko cracked her neck before tossing the towel away somewhere. Ah, I was handling a pretty nasty villain until he just swooped in and took out the effer with only one hit. Pissed me off to no end. I thought he was a vigilante until he showed me his license and hero name. Midoriya asked with excitement and wide eyes, what's his hero name? Miruko rolled her eyes and smiled slightly. She had learned about his fascination with heroes, so she decided to challenge him. If you can figure out his hero name before the end of the week, then I'll let it be known you're my favorite and only in turn. Midoriya heard this and his eyes steeled with determination to figure out his teacher's hero name. Momo Yaoyorozu's internship so far has been interesting. Had anyone told her she would have the DMNTRX hero as a mentor for a week, she would have assumed they were insane. However, Midnight has proven to be an excellent teacher. Do you know why you failed in the tournament? Midnight asked with no amount of stuckton in her voice. Almost as if a SWCH was flicked. Yayorozu blinked, feeling unprepared and ambushed. But she racked her brain before asking, because I didn't think fast enough. Midnight nodded, correct. Your biggest weakness right now is not being able to quick think. You're always about analyzing and processing your opponents. However, there will be times where you will be overwhelmed and you have to think on the fly about what you're going to do. Yayorozu listened and looked down at her hands, fidgeting and playing with them. She looked up and Midnight could see a glint in her student's eyes. A glint to prove herself. Will you teach me? Midnight allowed herself a sultry smirk before licking her lips. It sent a shiver down the student's spine before Midnight said with her stuck voice, class starts now, and you will refer to me as MSTRS. It would be a long and hard day for Miss Alchemist. Why does everyone believe I should talk to them? No one will ever understand these feelings I have. Stain will pay for what he did to my brother. No one will stop me. No one. Tenya Ida thought this as he stared at the paperwork at his desk. Working with Manuel did little to distract his thoughts. He gripped his pen tightly, nearly breaking it when his mentor arrived. Hey Ida. We're going out patrolling again. Ida blinked and looked up at him before nodding stiffly, of course. The two walked out of the agency building where the misty cold air brushed against them. It was a full moon and the streets looked as busy as they did in the daytime. It was a peaceful night. Hey Ida, I don't mean to pry, but you sure you're okay? Manuel asked his intern, to which the aforementioned student stiffened and answered, of course, sir. The hero frowned, you sure? You know you can talk to me if you're not feeling well. Even though he could not show his emotions through the helmet, Ida was seething. Are they all just going to say the same thing about me? They will never understand. He needs to pay. I'm quite positive, sir. Ida said with a bit of an edge, showing that he did not wish to speak about it. Manuel looked at him with uncertain eyes but nodded. Okay. They started walking when an explosion erupted, about several blocks from the two's location. Manuel and Ida started running towards the source when they saw a hulking creature with rotting gray skin, exposed brain and eyes. It shrieked into the sky as civilians ran away in complete fear. Manuel's eyes widened as he asked with a shaking voice, what? What is that thing? I don't know. Ida responded as even though his classmates spoke about the Nomu, it didn't look anything like what they described it to be. Several pro-heroes appeared at the scene and they too, froze as they couldn't seem to understand or believe what their eyes are witnessing. Ida, go. Find other heroes and bring them back here. Manuel turned his head to look at Ida, who turned his head to look with outrage. What? No, I should be helping you. Ida protested. Do not argue with me, Ida. I've given you an order. Get out of here and bring help. Manuel pressed before looking at the Nomu and charged towards it. Ida stood still while gritting his teeth, DMNU. He spun around and began to run away from the destruction. He ran and ran until a shine of metal caught his eye. He slid to a stop before rushing to the source only to discover, BLD. Puddles of BLD layered the alley as two figures were situated in the alleyway. One was on the floor with his back against the wall. With Native American clothing matted with BLD, and two tomahawks laid beside him, it was the Native American hero, Native. The second figure was decked out in blades. Sheaths upon sheaths with various knives and swords were lined against his body. With a red tattered scarf and white cloth over his eyes, revealing his black irises, Tenya Ida finally found him. The one who hurt his older brother. Ida screamed as he charged towards him. Stay away, Ian. Midoriya and Miruko were on a bullet train heading towards Tokyo. Midoriya looked at his phone with sadness. Ida hasn't returned any of his messages or calls, and it was beginning to truly worry him. Hey Green Bean, you've been staring at your phone for too long. His mentor's voice reached his ears, which broke him from his stupor. Oh, sorry, Miss Miruko. Midoriya blushed and put his phone in his pocket. Miruko rolled her eyes and shook her head in amusement. This kid is just too fun to mess with. It was silent with only the sounds of the train going by before the hairs on both the back of the hero's neck stood up. Then suddenly the side of the train car in front of them exploded in metal as a pale, rotting creature with tubes coming out of its mouth and arms shrieked. The civilians screamed as it climbed inside the train. Midoriya's eyes widened as he recognized it. A Nomu. Miruko jumped and kicked it in the face, bending the metal doors before she gave it a roundhouse kick, launching it out of the hole it made. She spun her head to look at Midoriya, her platinum blonde hair blowing against the wind as she ordered. Stay here, Green Bean. She jumped out with the wind blowing several people back. Midoriya stood up on shaky legs. A Nomu. In Hosu City. Wait. Ida's in Hosu. Midoriya turned to the civilians, stay here. Call for help, someone will help you. He said before running towards the hole, activating his quirk and launching out of the hole. He managed to land onto the sidewalk safely before running towards the pillar of black smoke and fire that burned so bright, it seemed like the pits of hell opened up. He made it to an intersection where the fire originated. Only to see another monstrous Nomu fighting back against a bunch of pro-heroes. Midoriya could see many of them, however the one he was looking for was Manuel. He spotted the blue-themed hero and sprinted towards him. Manuel looked to see Midoriya running towards him. Kid! What are you doing here? Run! Get out of here! I can't. Not until I find Ida. Midoriya shouted against the loud fire. Ida! I sent him off to find help. Midoriya's eyes widened. It was no coincidence Ida chose to go to Hosu to intern. The hero killer's victims were all found in the general city. In alleyways. Midoriya began to run away from the fight. While running he pulled out his phone and texted his location to the mandatory group chat with his classmates. After finishing, he quickly scanned each alleyway until he came across the killer himself, along with Native and Ida. Dracula was seen in his office, writing on some documents before placing the pen down and rubbing his eyes of the tiredness he felt. Despite working well at night time, and despite becoming immune to most vampire weaknesses, except for the sun because of the miraculous invention known as sun block. Despite being able to keep going after being staked in the heart. Despite all of that, paperwork was his #1 weakness. Curse the dreaded document paper. The king of all vampires sighed before his eyes were hooked onto a picture. Not the picture of him with Team RWBY. No, it was the picture of that night. The wedding. Dracula held the hands of the snowy white-haired beauty known as Willow Schnee. He remembered it all. His son, the members of Team JNPR, Team RWBY, Carmilla, Glinda, Summer, Taeyang, Crow, Gyra, Callie, Alucard, Sypha and Trevor Belmont. He remembered the vows he gave Willow. The taste of her soft, yet cold lips pressed against his. The sight of the moon without a shattered piece in sight. Giving it the look of a full moon. And then. The attack. It was just on the dusk of the wedding that Salem, the queen of the dark creatures known as Grimm, attacked. He remembered it all. His life slowly fading, as if it was finally time for him to earn his rest. Fitting back against Salem, his own daughter corrupted by the Grimm pools. It weighed on his heart. The fact he had to kill his own daughter to give her peace. Watching as everyone crowded around him as the morning sun approached, letting him see what made it so special. Truthfully, it would never be as appealing as Willow. Suddenly a vibration was emanating in his pocket. He pulled out his phone to see a red dot in Hosu City sent by izukumidoriya. Some of the classmates asked what it was about when Dracula's entire being froze. He stood and sprinted out of his office and out into the open area of the school. His back expanded to reveal bones with pieces of flesh attached to them in the shape of wings. He flew off, leaving a crater behind as he flew off towards where Midoriya was located. All that Midoriya replied back in the group chat was, "The hero killer." Midoriya dodged a knife slash to his chest before back flipping away from a sword trying to take his head off. Things weren't going well at all. First Ida decides to look for the hero killer. Midoriya and his mentor are separated, Nomas are attacking Hosu City and now he's fighting the infamous killer himself. Suffice to say, Midoriya was not having a good night. Ida, laying on the floor, shouted with a strained voice, "Midoriya! Leave! This is my fight." The green-haired student growled in annoyance, "Ida! Shut up! I'm trying to not get killed here." Midoriya slid down to swipe Stain's legs from under him. However, the hero killer managed to flip back onto his feet and growled before the ground before him was littered with ice. Midoriya looked behind to see Todoroki stare at him blankly. "Next time you send your location, don't have it be with the infamous hero killer. I'll be sure to send it with someone less," Midoriya said before looking back at Stain. "Don't let him ingest your BLD. He'll paralyze you." The killer smirked, as if he was impressed by how the kid managed to deduce his quirk. Well, what a brilliant mind you have. But it won't save you." Stain tossed some more knives which Todoroki blocked by making an ice wall. Stain bursted through the wall and managed to cut the two-tone student's cheek. He kicked Todoroki away before dodging the haymaker Midoriya sent. Stain backflipped, kicking Midoriya in an uppercut kick. With his steel-toed boots with spikes attached. BLD seeped out of Midoriya's chin and under his jaw, making him grip it to stop the BLD from spilling profusely. "Midoriya!" Todoroki shouted while clutching his chest before suddenly freezing and falling onto the floor. Midoriya looked at Todoroki and hissed, "F." Midoriya turned his eyes towards the hero killer whom was menacingly walking towards him. "Look at you all. You're naive little kids who think you can become heroes in a society where so many fakes reside. You haven't seen what I've seen. But you will. I'll make you see." Stain tossed a knife towards Midoriya who managed to dodge it but fell onto the floor. He got up off the floor. When he looked up, there was a flash of silver and then darkness. Midoriya could only scream in agony which people could hear all throughout the city. Yaoyorozu was having a difficult but rewarding time with Midnight. She rolled her head around, popping her neck bones before laying down on the bed. She sighed and looked at Midnight who was currently brushing her hair while in a bathrobe. There was certainly a lot more to her than what met the eye. She was flirty and loved to make people squirm and lower their guards with her stuck voice before going in for the kill. She was like a siren, and that's what Midnight wanted to instill into the young creating hero. How to use your body and voice as a weapon. It was rather enlightening for Momo to learn. That and the added lessons from her teacher were helping her boost her confidence. She was broken from her thoughts by the ring of her phone. She pulled it out to see Midoriya sending a message. She opened it and saw his location. Hosu City. She texted in the group chat asking why he sent that location when he replied to everyone saying, "The hero killer." Her eyes widened and she looked at Midnight. She jumped from her bed, MSTRS. The R-rated hero looked at her student and asked curiously, "What is it?" Yaoyorozu's breathing grew as she answered, "Midoriya. He found the hero killer. In Hosu City." Midnight's eyes scrunched together in confusion, "What?" Midoriya is facing off against the hero killer. We have to help him. Yaoyorozu repeated with desperation in her voice. Midnight's eyes widened before furrowing her brows. She looked at her and ordered, "Go. I'll catch up with you." Yaoyorozu did not hesitate in running out of the hotel room, down the hall, ignoring some of the civilians passing through. Not once did she start asking herself why she was growing increasingly worried for a student she's never really talked to. Perhaps it was her job as vice president to look after her classmates. Or perhaps after seeing him win the tournament, she wanted to be like him. Quick thinking and positive. Maybe she wanted to apologize for the way she thought about him. That he wasn't really fit to be a hero, even with a powerful quirk like his. His personality, while optimistic, and there have been times where he impressed her, she believed he wouldn't make it far as a hero. But then, when it was revealed what that brute, Bakugou, did to Midoriya since he was 4 years old, it made her feel awful. Like she was going to throw up. Suddenly it made sense why he was the way he was. No one was ever there to save him. So he desperately wants to save someone else from the same fate he suffered. Then, she watched as he won the tournament and she was proved wrong once more. Once she finds him and they make it through, she's going to apologize. Apologize for the cold-hearted thoughts in her mind that she had about Midoriya. She made it outside where she could see the black smoke rising a few miles from the hotel. She closed her eyes and a motorcycle sprang forth from the front of her hero outfit. She climbed up on it before creating a set of keys from her palm. She turned on the ignition and revved up the motorcycle before driving off towards Midoriya's location. The wind blew violently against her face, managing to blow the ponytail away, leaving her hair to WHP around behind her. But then, she heard a scream. A scream filled with so much pain and agony, it made Yaoyorozu's heart freeze and her skin grow cold as ice. She sped off towards the alley before stopping at the sight. Her eyes widened to see BLD. BLD flowing like a river towards the sewer drain in front of her. The source of the scream turned out to be Midoriya, on the ground writhing while both of his hands were on his eyes. BLD seeped through his hands as if he was crying BLD. Todoroki laid beside him on his stomach, unable to move. The same was said for Ida. Todoroki struggled to turn his head, but he could see her out of the corner of his eye. Why Yaoyorozu? She didn't register him as she stared ahead with wide eyes. There stood the hero killer himself. Tall and menacing with glowing red eyes and a serrated blade coated in BLD. Even his tongue had stains of BLD on them as he stared ahead at Momo Yaoyorozu. Ah! Another kid wanting to play hero. His dark voice brought a shiver to her spine as she gripped the handles of her motorcycle. Her knuckles white as her pulse quickened. Go on home. Unless you want to end up like these little lambs. Stain warned her, but she didn't hear him. She pulled back the right handle, revving up the engine, and she shouted in rage. Stay away from my classmates. She let go of the brake and sped off towards the hero killer before standing on the seat and backflipped off of it, launching the motorcycle towards Stain, who brought his katana up, but was smacked back further away into the alleyway. Yaoyorozu landed on her feet before going to Midoriya and kneeling down beside him. Midoriya. Midoriya. She touched his face and he jumped slightly. Midoriya. It's me. She said while tears began to leak out from her eyes. She used her quirk to make bandages appear from her chest. Why Yaoyorozu? Midoriya whimpered in pain. Yes, it's me. I need you to move your hands, Midoriya. She said calmingly, but Midoriya shook his head. It hurts. It hurts so much. I know. I know it does, but I need you to do this for me. Do you trust me, Midoriya? Momo asked as she placed a hand on his bloody cheek, letting him feel her warmth. Why yes. Then please. Remove your hands so I can tend to them. But before she could do anything, Ida shouted, Yaoyorozu. Watch out. She spun her head to look ahead of the alley and saw Stain stand up. He had a bloodthirsty grin on his face as he shouted, "Yes. Yes. 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 You are one of the only heroes uncorrupted by this society. You are worthy of the name hero. I won't kill you, or that boy. But these fakes. They must be purged." Stain pointed his blade towards Native, Ida, and Todoroki. Yayorozu. Midnight's voice could be heard around the corner before appearing at the front of the alley, and her eyes landed on Momo, kneeling beside Midoriya. Stain's eyes narrowed especially. "You." He tossed a knife towards the R-rated hero, whom looked up and moved her head away. However, the knife grazed her neck, making her choke as blood squirted out. She placed both of her hands to her neck to stop the blood. She fell backwards and could feel the world become blurry. "Mstrs." Momo shrieked with a hand to her mouth in shock. Ida's eyes widened, as did Todoroki's, while Native struggled to stand up. Ida watched all this happen and realized. "This is all my fault." Midnight gurgled and spat out blood as she struggled to stay conscious. Stain sneered, "Aslt, like you should never have become a hero. The way you flaunt your body. The way you talk and wave that WHP of yours. Especially your outfit. You're by far the faker's hero I've ever met. This society will be better off without fakes like you." He spat out as he rushed towards the fallen hero. He jumped up with his sword raised above his head, ready to strike down Midnight. "No!" Yayorozu screamed as she rushed towards the two when a hand grabbed the bloodied blade. Stain looked up to see him. It was Dracula. And he was pissed off. Dracula pulled the blade forward, by proxy Stain, and socked him square in the face, launching Stain into a wall, leaving a cracked dent. Todoroki suddenly felt the weight leave him, allowing the two-toned student to stand up. He groaned before limping towards Midoriya and knelt down beside him. Midoriya. It's me. Todoroki. Todoroki. What's happening? Is everyone okay? Midoriya asked while turning his head, showing Todoroki the damage done to his eyes. Midoriya's eyes were lacerated horizontally. There was nothing left of the iris or that innocent shine. Blood dripped down from his eyelids and the wounds ended from one side to the other. It was a sickening sight to see, and it made Todoroki nearly throw up. Everything is fine. Mr. Teeps is here now." Ida felt the weight lift up as well. He stood up and slightly stumbled. He breathed heavily before looking at Midoriya, then at Midnight, and felt something weigh him down. Guilt. Guilt for what vengeance does. Tears steamed down his face. "Midoriya. I'm so sorry. I brought this on you all." Todoroki looked at him with anger. "Pull it together, Ida. We have to get them to a hospital." Ida wiped the tears away from his eyes and nodded, "Right. Of course." He limped towards Native, who groaned, "It's official. I'm retiring." Ida knelt down and grabbed a hold of the hero's arms before putting one over his shoulder. He began to walk him out of the alley and into the street. Todoroki did the same with Midoriya. He managed to wrap the bandages Momo created around the green student's eyes and limped out into the street. Dracula looked at Midoriya and his eyes widened at the state. Before a layered breath escaped Midnight's lips. Dracula knelt down beside Midnight and placed his cape against the wound on her neck. She turned her head slightly and squinted at him before whispering in a raspy voice. "Vlad. Is that you?" Dracula slightly smiled at her. "It's me, Namuri. I'm here." She reached up and caressed his cheek. He placed his cold hand on top of hers. "Come on, let's get you dash." There was a scream and Dracula spun around to see Stain hold Momo with a knife to her throat. "You." Stain growled as he pressed the blade against her skin. I've never seen you before. You're either a new hero. Or possibly a vigilante. Just who are you? Dracula glared at the hero killer with anger over having his student be held hostage. He spread his hand, revealing his long and sharp nails before Stain stiffened. Pressing the blade into Momo's neck, causing BLD to ooze slightly. You stay the F back. All of you stay back. Anyone tries anything, then her death will be on your hands. She may be worthy of the title of a true hero, but I won't hesitate to sacrifice her for my goal. I will purge this society of these fakes who dare call themselves heroes. All Might is a true hero and the only one worthy to kill me. Dracula stared him down before locking eyes with Momo. Seemingly without opening his mouth, he spoke to her. Yaoyorozu. I won't be able to save you if I try to attack him from another side. The only way is through. Momo's eyes widened as she understood what he was saying. She knew there was something different about her teacher. He wasn't normal, even by today's standards. He continued to speak in her head. Do you wish to live? Do you still wish to be a hero? Do you trust me? All she needed was to say one word and he'd do it. But was she able to accept it? Would she take it so they could end this nightmare? Yes. Dracula looked at her before looking at Stain with an enraged look in his eyes. The hero killer Stain. Your words may have meaning. But your actions have shown nothing but a willingness to slaughter these children. You blind my student and hurt one of the few people I love the most and call it your goal. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He looked up at Stain. You asked who I was. I am Vlad Dracula Teeps. And I have had enough. Suddenly, something pushed through Momo's body along with Stain's. BLD exploded and landed on the floor and destroyed bricks. BLD escaped from Momo's mouth as did Stain's. Momo looked down to see Dracula's arm shoved through her chest. The king of vampires ripped his arm out and caught Momo's body as it dropped. Stain collapsed onto the street and whispered, finally. A true hero does. What is required? Stain's eyes stared off before the light in his eyes faded away. Todoroki and Ida watched the entire thing with widened eyes as they couldn't believe what their teacher did. Dracula knelt down with Momo on his knee. He raised his right hand up and but into his wrist before placing it against Momo's lips. Drink my BLD. And become Draculina. Dracula stood in front of the window where multiple doctors performed surgery on Midoriya in the room. His arms spread out as two doctors hovered over his head. Various bloody tools placed on tables. Seeing Midoriya's eyes be poked by scalpels and even scissors, made Dracula sick. Despite seeing the most gruesome deaths, even causing some of those deaths, to see what's happening to Midoriya. It was too much. Dracula placed a hand on the glass, guilt weighing heavy on his heart. He pressed his forehead against the window with his eyes closed. He hasn't felt this guilty since. He hurt Weiss. Now several of his students are injured. One by him and the rest by a killer. He barely registered footsteps approaching towards him. Until a hand was placed on his shoulder. Making him spin around and pull his arm back with his sharp claws, ready to pierce someone's throat. Rumi Usagiyama raised her hands swiftly. Hey hey. It's me. The king lowered his arm and released a sigh. She lowered her hands and looked over his shoulder at Midoriya. She released a shuddered breath as she placed a hand over her mouth. F. She whispered before turning away. His eyes are damaged. Beyond repair. Will you be able to do anything about it? With your powers? Rumi asked, with a hint of desperation in her voice. Dracula sighed. I can't give him a new pair of eyes. Not without turning him into a monster like me. Rumi scoffed and shouted. Bullshit. You turned that girl into AF vampire. And you were the one that nearly killed her. If you can do that, then you can help him. Or are you giving up on him? This was the wrong question to ask as Dracula glared at her with burning eyes of red and his fangs bared. Don't you dare say that. I'm not giving up on that boy. I'm not giving up on any of my students. Not like you, where you left him alone. When he finished, he blinked and his anger snapped away, leaving regret at the sight of hurt on her face and her rabbit ears lowered in hurt. I am so sorry. Dracula said, to which she shook her head, her platinum blonde hair waving around. No. You're right. It's my fault he left. I told him to stay while I dealt with that thing. Regret seeped into her voice with tears brimming from her eyes. Dracula brought his arms around her in comfort. The rabbit hero started to cry softly as she wrapped her arms around his neck. Dracula gently rocked her back and forth as her cries turned to sniffles and whimpers. It hurt the king to hear her cry. She was more of a battle-hardened woman when they met, this was rather new for her. Multiple footsteps approached the pair, to which Dracula glanced to see a man with a dog's head in a suit, along with a woman with shoulder-length blonde hair slicked back in a navy blue suit and pencil skirt. However, one everyone was all too familiar with was the number 2 hero, Endeavor. Dracula released a low growl which made Rumi look at him before following his eyesight to see them. The two broke the hug and stood still, while Dracula's eyes glowed bright red and Rumi was glaring specifically at the woman. Vlad Teeps. Rumi Usajiyama. The woman greeted with a degree of coldness in her voice. Hero Safety Public Commission President. Dracula said with the same degree. I'm Kenji Tsuragami, Police Chief of Hosu. Woof. The dog man introduced himself with a bow to which Dracula and Miruko bowed back. What do you want? Dracula said towards the president, to which Endeavor glared. You will show her respect. We don't have respect for you or her. Rumi hissed as she thumped her foot on the floor. Enough. The president said. We're here to take you in, Teeps. For your assault against a student, and your incompetence in allowing your students to be injured by the hero killer. Dracula allowed himself a smirk. You think you can take me? You believe that? Endeavor growled, it's over, Teeps. They may have tolerated you for this long, but this incident is the last straw. Murdering your own student to kill Stain. This angered the king as he got directly into the flame hero's face and bared his fangs. Do not talk to me about murdering my student when I know what you do when at home, hypocrite. That's enough. The chief of police got in between the two and pushed them back slightly. Endeavor glared at him, with the temperature increasing in the hallway. We are willing to hear out your reason for this latest incident. Woof. Tsuragami said, to which Endeavor turned his head to him in shock. Are you insane? This thing doesn't deserve to get a single sentence out. You stay the F out of this, but... Miruko stepped forward. You don't even have a real reason to be here. As a matter of fact, I do. I'm here to see my son. Endeavor said with his head held up high. Don't tell me you actually care about him, not now after what you've done. Dracula threatened him, which made him sweat and step back. If we're all done, let's get this over with. The president said with annoyance. Everyone was silent when Dracula proposed, instead of defending myself, why don't we see my student? The she-male president because her raised an eyebrow at her. If this is some kind of sick joke, then we're taking you away now. Do I look like someone who would jest about something like this? Dracula asked rhetorically. Instead of waiting for an answer, Dracula began to walk towards Yaoyorozu's hospital room. Rumi walked beside him while intertwining her fingers with his. Before long, they made it to the room. Dracula walked inside with Rumi behind. Everyone else made it inside and watched with impatience while the chief watched with curiosity. Yaoyorozu could only see darkness. Like a void. Was she dead? Was this what awaited her? She looked at herself to see nothing has changed. No hole through her body, no BLD. She didn't understand what was happening. That was until Dracula appeared before her. Yaoyorozu. How does it feel now that you're dead? Her eyes widened as she felt pain in her chest. She looked down and suddenly a bloody hole where her heart supposedly was there. She couldn't bring herself to scream as she felt herself begin to lose consciousness when a cold hand was placed on her cheek. She looked up to see Dracula look at her with soft eyes. However, you made a choice. You chose to walk the path of the Draculina. Welcome to a world of gods and monsters. After he said this, the hole in her chest began to close up, however her skin started to turn pale. Her hair grew a few shades darker, turning nearly pitch black, blending in with the background. Her mouth began to hurt as her front canines began to expand and elongate. By the end, her canines were turned into fangs. Her onyx eyes now had hints of red in them, giving them the look of burning fire turning to smoke. Her nails began to elongate and sharpen, looking like claws before gaining a few inches taller. She now reached to Dracula's chin as she looked up at him with widened eyes. What? What am I? Dracula placed a hand in her shoulder. You are like me. A creature of the night. A Nosferatu. A vampire. I name you Draculina. An heiress to the name Dracul. She looked at him before looking at her hands. Now, it's time for you to wake up. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up. The first thing Momo Yaoyorozu woke up to see was blinding lights cascading down on her. She shot up before feeling a hand on her shoulder. She blinked rapidly when she noticed several things. Her vision was changing between seeing proper colors, then everything darkened with heightened colors around a person. She could see Miruko's silhouette with purple and yellow rabbits floating around her. Then she could see her skeleton, organs, BLD stream. She could even hear her heart beat. She turned to the side to look at Dracula, who had multiple colors around him. Yellow flames around his shoulders, purple smoke nearly enveloping his entire body, blue and white snowflakes falling down around him, and finally, red rose petals blowing around him like a tornado. But around the outline of his silhouette was red and black flames. She blinked rapidly before her vision returned back to normal. She was breathing heavily when she could see Dracula's worrying face. Mr. Teeps? Momo asked in confusion before looking around. Where am I? You're in the Hosu Medical Center. It's over. Stain's gone. Miruko said while crossing her arms over her chest. Momo's eyes widened. Midoriya. Midnight. Todoroki. Ida. Are they okay? Dracula places his hands on both of her shoulders. It's alright. It's alright. They're alive. They're being treated right now. Right now, our question is on you, Miss Yaoyorozu. Woof. Kenji Tsuragami said as he stepped forward. I'm the chief of police in Hosu. Since you're awake, Woof, we'd like to ask you some questions. Momo looked at the dog man in confusion but nodded her head. How did you come to find Stain along with your fellow peers? Woof. I received a text message from Midoriya with his location attached. When we asked what it was for, he replied the hero killer. I informed Midnight, who gave me permission to find Midoriya. When I did. Oh my god. The scenes of Midoriya with his hands over his eyes while everyone was on the floor paralyzed. The absolutely agonizing screams coming from Midoriya was fresh in her ears. Midoriya's eyes were slashed. Ida and Todoroki were paralyzed, along with a hero. I tried to bandage Midoriya's eyes but Stain was close to attacking me. That was. When Midnight appeared, Stain threw a knife and cut her throat. He was about to kill her when Mr. Teeps appeared and stopped him. Then you were taken hostage by Stain. and Teeps here shoved his hand through you to kill him. Endeavor finished while glaring at Dracula. No. He told me what he needed to do, and that I had a choice. A choice to end it quickly and still live. And I said yes. Momo contradicted the number 2 hero. The president raised an eyebrow at her. You allowed him to possibly kill you and Stain, knowing he could bring you back. Momo stared into her eyes and had an unintentional amount of ferocity in her eyes as she replied, yes. I trusted my teacher. He knew what to do. Endeavor scoffed, this is a lie. They've staged the entire goddamn thing. Miruko growled, go to hell. You think they staged being attacked and ending up injured? I concur. Woof. This is some pretty serious accusations with no basis or evidence to back that up. The chief said with a growl. The president glared at Dracula, who glared back. How exactly did you bring her back? How were you able to close her chest back up? The president asked, to which Dracula answered. Part of my quirk is giving a person who is close to dying, my BLD has healing properties. But only if the person in question accepts it. It was silent as the president stared at Dracula, whom, his eyes glowed bright red, and used some subtle hypnosis to make her let it go. This incident never happened. This conversation never took place. One more incident like this, and I will see to not personally that you're buried. She began walking away while Endeavor glared at Dracula and said one last thing before leaving the room. One day, I will take you down, monster. The chief looked at Momo before looking at her teacher. On behalf of the heroes, as well as the police in Hosu. He bowed low before him, thank you. Thank you for taking him down. Dracula bowed back, of course. The dog man walked out of the room, leaving Dracula with his student and Miruko. The rabbit hero breathed a sigh of relief. Hell, Vlad. You have to watch out now. They'll criticize every move you make. They won't be able to touch me while at UA. He countered. They'll find a way. Miruko argued. And we will fight back. Dracula finished the conversation at that. Rumi looked at him before sighing. I'm going to check up on Green Bean. She walked out of the room, leaving Dracula alone with Momo. The newly reborn vampiress looked at him, Mr. Teeps. He looked back at her and sat down at the edge of her bed. Yes, Yayarozu. Am I really a vampire? She asked in a weak voice to Waiku. He nodded slightly, yes. Because you were turned into one by me, you'll be a vampire more powerful than a typical vampire. She looked at her hands and the sharp nails. She began talking to him about her sight and finally what his colors were. By the end, Dracula was shaken slightly but closed his eyes to calm himself. I see. You have a gift of sight. Something unique to you and only you. Momo's fingers lingered over her eyes before asking, what do those colors mean? Dracula looked at her and sighed, I can't say much as. It's still fresh. But those 4 colors represent 4 girls that I greatly cared for. They were heroes in training. I taught them everything I could on how to be better than everyone else and to save people. The red roses. Her name was Ruby Rose. She was innocence incarnate. She's much like Midoriya. Wanting to save people and be like the heroes in comics and fairy tales. He released a breath as possibly BLD began to trickle out of his eye. The snowflakes. Weiss Schnee was her name. She came from a rich family and believed in proper form and studying. She was rather prideful. But as she spent time with the others, she became more kind. After her father was arrested for his illegal activities, I took custody of her. The purple smoke. Blake Belladonna. She was a girl who came from a bad beginning but strived to be better. She wanted to provide better rights for everyone. But the people she fought with were evil. When she realized it, she left and I took her in. The final one. Yang Xiaolong. She was the epitome of an adventurer and thrill-seeker. She could take a hit and dish back twice as much. She was related to Ruby, so she was protective of her. Dracula sighed heavily and wiped his eyes of the BLD before looking at Momo Yaoyorozu. Those girls meant so much to me, that I always pray to see them again. They were essentially my daughters. Yaoyorozu could feel her heartstrings being tugged as she wrapped her arms around his neck, making him hug her back. She let go of him and asked, Will you teach me how to live like you? Dracula looked at her with a soft smile before putting some strands of her hair behind her hair, of course. However, there will be things that may go against your morals. There will be challenges in life that will threaten the way you live. I say this now, because if you do not push through them, you won't make it as a vampire. Understand? Momo was silent and looked down to contemplate her answer. Dracula placed his hand on her shoulder. Think about it. He stood up and walked out of her room, leaving her alone with her thoughts. You serious? It was morning when Dracula received a call from the support course teacher, Power Loader. I'm serious. Hatsum managed to create a system. Somehow she learned about Midoriya's wound and spent all day and all night working on it. I've even tested it, it works. Dracula was silent as the opportunity presented itself. Here they were, worrying about how Midoriya would continue being a hero in training, and Hatsum creates a technical marvel. How soon can you get it here? Dracula asked with hope laced within his voice. An hour or two possible. Okay, get it here and bring Hatsum with you. Dracula ordered before ending the phone call. He looked at Midoriya, whom laid in bed with his bandages around his head, covering his eyes. For the first time since being in the hospital, hope had filled the king of vampires. A soda can was kicked off onto the road. The kicker was Katsuki Bakugou. A scowl was planted on his face permanently. Since his expulsion, his mom had been harsher on him, hating him for what he did to Midoriya. His father was actually visibly angry at him for the first time in his life. He even was blacklisted from every other hero school, which pissed him off to no end. All because of that teacher. He wished he could hurt him. He wanted to hurt Midoriya. He wanted to hurt everyone. He was pulled from his thoughts when a familiar raspy voice spoke to him. Hey kid. Bakugou spun around and growled at the man with faded blue hair and a gray hand over his face. You. Bakugou growled. That's right. Couldn't help but notice you walking alone. Bad day. Shigaraki quipped. The blonde bomber dropped to his haunches and released some explosions while shouting, What's stopping me from killing you, F-hand? Shigaraki stayed still and said, How about a proposal to kill that Midoriya brat? This made Bakugou stop and think about his proposal before standing up a bit more straight. I'm listening. Since the trek to the hospital, Tenya Ida was waging a war inside of his mind. Only now, was the realization of how much of a poison vengeance was coming to the student. What should have been anger was now replaced with guilt. It was all his fault. As Ida laid on his bed with his glasses on the nightstand next to him, footsteps echoed outside of his room when the door was opened. Ida grabbed his glasses and slid them over his ears before sitting up to see the one person he dreaded to speak with. Dracula. The teacher made his way to the foot of his bed and simply stared at Ida with a cold expressionless face, but in his eyes, Ida could have sworn he saw fire and blood swirling in his pupils. It was silent with the exception of the machinery within the hospital. However, that silence was broken up by Ida asking in a hopeless voice. Have you come to expel me? Dracula's cold stare turned into full-blown anger as he spoke with a growl. Your actions have most certainly given me serious considerations into expelling you. Because of your intentions to find Stain, it has led to Native retiring, Midoriya being blinded, Todoroki being hurt and Midnight's throat lacerated. While you interfering did save Native's life, the consequences outweigh the benefits. I should expel you. I should have you blacklisted. With each person's injury being listed, Ida cringed and couldn't look at his teacher anymore. Tears streamed down his cheeks as the full weight of it all was crashing down on him. He waited for the inevitable words to escape from Dracula's lips. But I'm not going to. This made Ida blink and the tears seemed to have stopped. He looked back up at Dracula, whom was no longer enraged. He moved around the bed to sit down at the edge. The king of vampires sighed as he looked at his student. You know exactly what has come of this, and you feel guilty. Had you still had that fiery vengeance now, then I would have truly expelled you. Ida, vengeance is not something to look towards. It is not like in the movies or comics. It will leave you empty and there is no sense of accomplishment. No one ever thinks about how it will affect those you are close to. Ida looked down and gripped the blanket before asking, what am I to do now? What is my punishment? Dracula was silent as he looked at the window and the sunlight that was shy near his feet. It was full minute when Dracula answered. Your position as class president will be revoked, and you will be attending therapy sessions with Hound Dog. If you wish to acquire the position again, you must prove to me that you have changed for the better. Am I understood? Ida looked up at him with wide eyes but knew better than to argue with him. It was better than being killed. Or worse, expelled. Priorities sorted out. Who will be class president then? Ida questioned, to which Dracula replied. Yaoyorozu will be taking over the position. Ida's head snapped up to him with widened eyes. Yaoyorozu. She's awake. Yes, she's awake, but she's not receiving visitors right now. Ida swallowed the lump in his throat. Sir, could you tell me how you saved her? I'm afraid I can't say much, for my power is meant to be secret. But rest assured, she is alive and well. Ida bowed his head. I understand, sir. Despite his words, his mind still wondered what his powers are that allowed him to bring back the dead. Could it be his quirk? Ida thought in his head. It's not scientifically possible. Is it? Dracula stood up from the bed and addressed Ida one last time. Now, get some rest, and remember, this is your second chance, and I rarely give them. Before Ida could acknowledge his words, Dracula left his room. Ida was now left with his thoughts as he laid back down on the bed. He pulled his glasses off and placed them back on the nightstand before closing his eyes. Dracula sat in the main hall of the hospital with his head in his hand before the doors opened and Power Loader, outside of his suit, walked towards the Class 1A teacher. To his left was May Hatsum, the resident headache yet technical genius of the support class, carrying a large suitcase in her left hand. Dracula stood up and gripped Power Loader's hand in a firm shake. Thank you for coming on short notice. Dracula thanked his fellow teacher. Yes, well, this one decided to invent it on a whim. Power Loader nudged to his left. Where's Greenie? Is he okay? Is he safe? Hatsum asked in rapid succession. Dracula placed his hand on her shoulder to calm her down. Calm yourself, Miss Hatsum. Midoriya is okay. He's out of surgery right now. Dracula ordered her gently, which seemed to have made her mellow out. Now do you have the package? Dracula asked, to which the student nodded. She held up the suitcase, to which Dracula grabbed it and opened it to reveal a headset with cat ears and speakers built inside, a jar that contained 2 metal balls which was assumed to be the eyeballs. There were several wires hooked to the headset as well, the eyeballs. Dracula scanned it over and his knowledge of human anatomy began to flood his mind. Thank you, Miss Hatsum, I will take it from here. Hatsum blinked, but wait. I know how to operate that baby. I know how to install it. As do I. Dracula stated as he closed the case. I promise you, Miss Hatsum, I know what I'm doing. Hatsum tried to argue, but her teacher put a hand on her shoulder. Please, Hatsum. Trust him. He knows. Dracula began walking away with the case in hand. The easy part was done, now came the hard part. Convincing the doctors to let him operate on Midoriya. Systems are primed and ready for use. This was the first thing Midoriya heard. A female's voice. He opened his eyes to see nothing. Then as he moved his arms, a sudden wave of bluish-green washed over his eyesight. The waves edged along shapes and what was left was the bluish-green floating specks. Is someone there? Midoriya asked before his breathing became fast and broken, as if he was hyperventilating. Greetings Midoriya. I am Ever. The central intelligence built into the hardware giving you synthetic eyesight. The female voice introduced herself. She had a soft-spoken British accent that seemed to make Midoriya calm down slightly, despite his odd sight. Where am I? Midoriya nearly shouted as he shook his head around, trying to look. Another wave seemed to escape from his lips, shaping his bed, the door, TV, along with several chairs. You are in the Hosu City Hospital. You have suffered severe lacerations to your eyes that has rendered you blind. Eva explained. Then the memories began flooding back to Midoriya. Him and Miruko on the train, a Nomu attacking and Miruko attacking back. Midoriya disobeying her orders and going out to find Ida and encountering Stain. All he remembered seeing was the blade and then, nothing. He began to breathe even heavier as he struggled to ask. Is everyone okay? Eva answered, Mr. Todoroki and Mr. Ida are recovering well. However, Miss Yaoyorozu is deceased. His mechanical eyes widen, and no tears. He began to cry and place his hands on his head. He couldn't hear the increased beeping on the heart monitor or Eva's attempts to calm Midoriya. Until suddenly, he felt two gloved hands on his cheeks. It started him and he screamed a bit and tried to push away. That was until he heard her voice. Hey! Hey! Green Bean! It's me! It's Miruko! This made the blind student stop and control his breathing. The bluish-green waves revealed her face and eyes, as well as her rabbit ears, without any color. Miruko? Is it true? Is Yaoyorozu really dead? Rumi cringed slightly as she tried to think about how to explain this. That's not exactly something I can explain. But wait, how did you know? Midoriya stammered, there's an AI in my head. I think. He placed a hand on the top of his head, feeling metal. He traced the shape of the metal until he figured out what it was. Are these cat ear? Midoriya shouted while blushing, making Rumi snicker at his predicament. Well, they aren't bunny ears, but they'll work. Midoriya blushed and put his hands down on his lap. He looked at Rumi and tilted his head. What did you mean by it being something you can't explain? The rabbit hero sighed, well because I don't fully understand it myself, but Vlad can tell you. Yaoyorozu is now a vampire. Midoriya jumped and Miruko spun around to see a man in a black suit and tie. With a red handkerchief in the pocket of his suit. His skin was pale with shoulder-length black hair to contrast. His eyes were a startling yellow like the moon. Miruko ears flattened to show that she was threatened. Who the F are you? The man in black bowed slightly, apologies. My name is Genya Arikado. I work closely with Mr. Teeps. Miruko narrowed her eyes at him while Midoriya asked, a vampire? Arikado looked at him, that is correct. The blind student shuddered before something clicked in his head. Dracula. Miruko looked back at Midoriya, figured it out, didn't ya? As in Vlad the Impaler? She nodded, yeah, took me a while to understand the concept, but he hasn't lied to me yet. So. Vampires exist? Midoriya asked with a shiver going down his spine. Indeed they do. Arikado confirmed. What do you want, by the way? Why are you here? Miruko glared at him to which he replied. I've simply come to see the student that Mr. Teeps has talked much about, but mainly to speak to him. I shall leave you to be. Good night. Arikado bowed before them and began walking down the hallway. The rabbit hero sighed before looking at her in turn. You should get some sleep, green bean. He nodded meekly, making her ruffle his green hair before standing up from his bed. Midoriya laid his head down on the bed and closed his eyes before allowing sleep to take him. Miruko moved to a chair, sat down and closed her eyes. Dracula rubbed his eyes as he stood up from his chair next to Yaoyorozu's bed and walked out of her room. He began to make his way towards Shoto Todoroki's room when a familiar voice spoke from behind him. Father. He stopped and turned around to see Genya Arikado. He looked at him with a slight smile. Son. It was about 2 days until Midoriya was able to leave his bed. He spent a majority of the hours getting used to walking, and learning about the new hardware surgically implanted into his head. So my eyesight works like echolocation? Midoriya asked, the bluish-green waves bouncing off the walls and objects in sight. Correct. The ears are also able to pick up footsteps as well as heartbeats. Therefore, it is impossible for anyone to practice stealth in close proximity. Eva explained. Wow. Midoriya looked at his hands before snapping his fingers, making sound waves escape from his hand. Footsteps could be heard, so Midoriya looked up only to gasp. In front of him was Momo Yaoyorozu. She appeared to wear an oversized t-shirt and black shorts along with some tennis shoes. Her hair was down, cascading down her shoulders and back. Midoriya's cybernetic eyes widened. Why Yaoyorozu? She slightly smiled in an awkward way. Hello Midoriya. He blinked before standing a bit more straight. How are you feeling? She giggled a bit, I'm okay, but what about you, Midoriya? Ah. WWL, I don't have any broken bones, at least. He laughed nervously while rubbing the back of his head. That's good. It was silent as even Eva could feel the awkwardness in the air. It eventually came to a close when Midoriya and Yaoyorozu spoke at the same time. So Yaoyorozu dash. So Midoriya dash. Oh, I'm sorry dash. No, I'm sorry dash. You go first. No, please, you can go first. I insist. No, I insist. It went silent again before Midoriya took a deep breath. So. A vampire. Yes. Yaoyorozu acknowledged. How does that feel like? He asked with a tilt of his head. It feels cold. Like I feel no warmth from my body anymore, but I'm not shivering. I see. Midoriya looked at her and couldn't see any sound waves emanating from her chest, meaning she had no heartbeat. So anyway, what did you want to say? Midoriya asked, to which Yaoyorozu became uncomfortable and answered while playing with some strands of her hair. I wanted to apologize to you, Midoriya. He tilted his head, what do you mean? You see. When you first came to U.A, I had nothing but indifference for you. I didn't think you would have made it far in the hero course, and when you gave up the position of class president to Ida, while I was vice president, I thought you did out of favoritism for him. But when you helped fight the villains, as well as seeing your capabilities in the sports festivals, I had to rethink my feelings about you. So please accept my apologies. Yaoyorozu bowed low in front of Midoriya. Yaoyorozu. There is no need for you to apologize. I understand your feelings, especially about the position of class president. I gave it to Ida because of his capabilities to properly address people and his leadership. But I guess that doesn't really mean much now. Midoriya tried to protest when Dracula spoke about Ida's punishment, but he wouldn't budge. But I knew you would have been able to help and even give Ida advice on any situation. That's why I didn't relinquish the position to you, because you were the most capable person to keep him anchored. So I understand, but there's nothing to apologize for. Yaoyorozu rose up and looked at Midoriya with a smile. A knock on the door was heard, making the two look to see Todoroki stand at the front. Midoriya. Yaoyorozu. Midoriya's eyes seemed to shine as he said excitedly, Todoroki. How are you feeling? Todoroki allowed himself a small smile. I'm quite well. I just came to see how you both were doing. Well, I'm alive, so. That's good. Midoriya played with some of his green curly hair. And what of you, Yaoyorozu? I'm doing pretty well. She replied before her vision switched to her special sight. Todoroki had fire emanating from his left shoulder while ice crystals formed on his right side. She took a look at Midoriya and could see green lighting crackling around him. However, there was blinding light of different colors in the middle of his body. What did this mean? She blinked and her eyesight returned to normal. Todoroki asked, so Midoriya, when will you be discharged? Oh, I just have one last checkup, then I'll be able to leave. We'll wait for you. Todoroki offered, to which Midoriya shook his head. There's no need to do that. Yaoyorozu placed a hand on his shoulder and offered him a small smile. It's okay, Midoriya, we're willing to stay with you. He looked at them with a smile, thank you. Hey Midoriya. What's with the headgear? Kaminari asked as the green-haired student entered the classroom. It was the first day back at U.A and everyone looked at Midoriya's metal cat ears and bluish-green eyes. You've got cat ears. Oh my god, you look super adorable. Mina squealed as she shook her body. Himiko, the adopted daughter of Vlad, squealed with her. Can they move? Can they? Can they? Hagakure asked while squealing too. Midoriya felt himself shake at the students crowding around him and making noise. I say, your eyes look different, Midoriya. Ace, the British exchange student, pointed out. The green glowing lens of his plague doctor mask looking at Midoriya. What happened? Scarlet, the French exchange student asked. Midoriya began to say before Yaoyorozu stepped in and placed a hand on his shoulder and addressed the classmates. Please, take your seats. We'll answer questions when the time is appropriate. Whoa Yamamoto, you look different as well. A little pale. You okay? Mina asked with a tilt of her head. Everyone, take your seat. Dracula walked in, which prompted everyone to sit down at their assigned seats. Shinso looked behind at Midoriya and cocked an eyebrow at his eyes and headgear. Ida looked down, not meeting his teacher's eyes. The teacher made his way to the podium and looked at his students. Now, several announcements before we begin. First, Tenya Ida has been retired from the position of class president. As it stands, Momo Yaoyorozu will be taking the position and Ace Berkeley will be your vice president. Well, lucky me. Ace joked, making some of his classmates snicker. Sir, why is Ida being retired? Shoji asked. We will answer that soon, but now our next announcement. Your term finals are in a week. Dracula spoke. This caused a bit of the students to freak out as they haven't studied. Dracula cleared his throat to bring the students' attention back. You have a full week to study and can even help tutor your fellow classmates. My office doors are also open if you require help. Also, after your finals are examined and graded, we will be going to a summer camp trip to truly focus on your quirks. This got everyone excited. But now, this technically goes against the official story, but because some of your peers were affected heavily, you all deserve to know the truth. He took a deep breath and spoke. Ida was retired as his punishment for going after the hero killer, Stain. The headgear on Midoriya and his eyes were a result of being attacked by him. The headgear is to help him see. Please hold your concerns until after class, and do not treat them differently. Am I understood? Yes, sensei. The whole class said in unison. while some looked at Midoriya with worry and at Ida with sympathy. Good, now take out your notebooks. We'll be discussing why vigilantes exist. After everyone had a notebook on their desk, Dracula wrote on the chalkboard. It started around the time quirks began. You have those who believe their power should be used for good, and those who believe they should use it for personal gain. Then there are those who do both. However, there was one who was considered the most popular vigilante. The Punisher. To which Dracula drew the infamous skull on the wall. The students wrote down the fact and Midoriya went the step beyond and drew the skull as well. How do you describe the Punisher? It's fairly simple. He was the most dangerous man in the world. He was a man who had nothing to lose. He believed that all criminals deserve to die. That a criminal is capable of breaking out of prison to do the same thing that got him or her in prison. During and after the end of the Punisher, new laws were set in place so that a hero could never take a criminal's life, not without a good cause. Dracula pulled down a cover in front of the whiteboard and placed his holographic phone on the podium before showing a video on the cover. What you're about to watch is archival footage of the Punisher in court. This was before he was considered part of the category of hero. Pay attention. Dracula pressed play and the students watched a blind lawyer question the aforementioned Punisher. A man with black shaved hair, bruises around his face and slightly fidgets sometimes. When the lawyer asked what happened when his family was killed, all the students could only look on in sadness. They understood why he killed criminals, because his family was murdered. Midoriya couldn't see the video on the board, but Eva uploaded the video into his head, allowing him to see the outlines of the people in the video, almost like he was there. He could listen to the lawyer. Finally, the lawyer asked the judge to treat the witness as hostile before going into a speech about what kind of man Frank Castle, the Punisher, he was. He was the man the city needed. It confused every student to hear that. What? Kaminari whispered while looking at Jiro, who shrugged cluelessly. The lawyer spoke about how sick the city was and that it didn't just need the police, it needed its people. It began to make the people in the courthouse cheer. The lawyer concluded that Frank wanted to help but took it too far. Frank didn't need to be put in prison, he just needed help. The lawyer finished that the city needed heroes. Well, that was a wonderful speech. Scarlet said, but Ace said, give it a second, darling. That's when Frank asked, Your Honor, can I say something? The judge granted his request and so Frank spoke. You know those people? He said with a sneer of disgust. The ones I put down, the people I killed. I want you to know that I'd do it all again. This caused the people in the courthouse and the students to gasp. The lawyer's speech about what kind of man Frank was shattered. What the F? Kirishima whispered. Frank continued, this is a circus, all right. It's a charade, it's an act. It's bullshit about how crazy I am. The judge reprimanded him for his language but Frank ignored it. I ain't crazy. I'm not crazy. Okay. I know what I did. I know who I am. And I do not need your help. No one but Midoriya could hear a woman cheer him on. I'm smack dab in the middle of my right goddamn mind, and any scumbag, any lowlife, any maggot piece of SHT that I put down, I did it because I liked it. The Punisher shouted, which caused the people to either protest him or cheer him on. The students watched in fear at this. Man talk about the criminals he kills, like they weren't people. That he enjoyed killing people. Hell, I loved it. I'm sitting here, I'm just itching. I am itching to do it again. And you think? What you think you're gonna send me to a nut house? Some doctor, they're gonna get me to stop from doing what I want to do. Well, that ain't happening. Not on my watch. The students could hear the people cheering him on and were pretty shocked at this. They're approving of this? Yaoyorozu questioned. The Punisher stood up and addressed the people. You people, you call me the Punisher, ain't that right? The big bad Punisher. Well, here I am. You want it, you got it. The guards began restraining and removing Frank from the stand. I am the Punisher. I'm right here. You want it, I'll give it to you. And anybody who came here today to hear me whine, to hear me beg. Well, you can kiss my peach. The Punisher shouted as he was being pulled away before looking at the judge. Do you hear me? I'm guilty. Come on, please, judge. I'm guilty, you hear me? I'm guilty. I'm guilty. As he was being dragged away, Frank looked at the camera and shouted. I'll kill every one of them. I'll kill every single one. The video stopped there with Frank's hate-filled eyes staring at the camera. Everyone couldn't help but shiver at the sight. Dracula grabs the phone and put it in his pocket before pulling the cover up. Now, what are your immediate thoughts on him? He's a psychopath. Kaminari said. Dracula shook his head. That is not the definition of a psychopath, Kaminari. A psychopath is a person incapable of empathy. Frank Castle is a traumatized veteran who has nothing left to lose. He's the product of a failed justice system. Everyone looked at Midoriya as he looked up at Dracula. Care to expand, Midoriya? The vampire teacher asked. Why, you see, the lawyer said that the city needed help. It was overrun with crime left in. Fisk's corruption. The police can't do it all, that's why Castle took the law into his own hands. Because the system is failing. That's correct. Dracula nodded and Ida raised his hand. Sir, how could the people cheer such a horrendous man? Because if they cannot get justice from official governing bodies, then they would have to look at those who are willing to do the hard things. Dracula looked at the class as he spoke. This is your lesson of the day. This world is not split into black and white. You may have your heroes and villains, but vigilantes are the in-between. They will do what it takes to save people, regardless if they do not have a license. Aside from underground heroes, vigilantes have seen what humans can do. Take this to heart, there is evil and good everywhere. There is good and evil in everyone. That's why you have choices, but your choices will always have consequences. After that, Dracula walked away from the podium and announced. That's it for today's lesson. You're dismissed. He walked out of the room, leaving the students alone to ponder their lesson. I must say, it's a shame that it had to come to that for justice to be done. Ace said as he shuffled his cards at the lunch table. I wouldn't call that justice, ma chère. Scarlet said as she took a bite of sushi. So how your internship, Ace? Jiro asked. Ah, it was an enlightening experience. Ed Shot introduced me to tarot cards. I think it was more of a prank to pull on people, but he taught me some new moves. Ace replied while placing down an ace of spades. And Teeps, how was she? Yaoyorozu asked. She was eccentric, but really took Ed Shot's words to heart. Anyway, how were all of your internships? For as much of an eccentric loudmouth as present Mike, he really taught me how to muffle and change the volumes in my wave boots. That and he helped me get used to loud noises. It was fun. What about your internship, Scarlet? Jiro replied with a finger around her ear jack. Scarlet answered as one of her ears flicked. Ryukyu is an amazing teacher and a great hero. She mostly showed me fighting moves but always thought my quirk can help in many places, such as reconnaissance, or helping to take a villain down. Ace moved his head to look at Yaoyorozu. And how was your internship? Well. What are you supposed to call me? Midnight asked as she had her 9-tailed WHP wrapped around Yaoyorozu's waist with her boot pressed against her head. MSTRS. Wrong. What's the other name? Mommy. Good, now take your punishment. Uneventful. Yaoyorozu suppressed a shudder as she took another bite of her food. Before anyone could say anything, there was a collision and everyone's head snapped to the sound to see a boy with blonde hair collide into Midoriya. "Oh, I'm sorry. I tried to get out of the way but your big head got in the way. I suppose I shouldn't be surprised since your head's perhaps full of Class 1A superiority." Monoma had a smirk on his face. "Excuse me good sir, but I think you attacked a blind student." Monoma turned around to see Ace walk towards him with a deck of cards in hand. "Huh? And who is this that walks toward me? Perhaps a fan of Class 1B? Come to show their support for the underdog?" Monoma posed while holding his head up high. "No. I'm from Class 1A. Ace answered, which confused the blonde. "Prick. Class 1A? So have you come to show off? To prove how much better you are than us?" Monoma sneered but Ace shook his head. "Not quite mate, I've come to make you apologize for bumping into you Midoriya here and to leave us alone. And if I don't, 1A scum." Ace didn't answer, he simply shuffled his cards until he pulled one out. "Oh dear. This is terrible." Monoma looked at him in confusion. "What?" He showed Monoma the card. It was the tarot card of death. "It would seem death will come to collect your soul." Monoma looked at the card then at him before laughing. "Is this your quirk? To show off cards to people and predict their deaths? How did you even get into the hero course? You must be so pathetic that your teacher took pity on you. You won't even show off your face when you're wearing that ridiculous mask." Ace's face couldn't be seen due to the plague doctor mask, but underneath he glared at Monoma. Monoma laughed until Ace looked behind him and gave off a chuckle. "It seems death is coming for you." Monoma stopped his laughing and looked at Ace before following his eyesight to see him. Dracula slowly walked towards Monoma with glare and his eyes glowing bright red. An aura of killing intent could be felt around him as he made it to Monoma, who was frozen in fear. "Apologize to Midoriya now." Monoma was shaking like he was naked in the snow. He looked at Midoriya, who was picking himself up and his tray. I am sorry." He bowed low before running away fast. Dracula looked at Ace and nodded his head. "Thank you for standing up for Midoriya." The plague doctor student nodded before looking at Midoriya. "Let's go get you a new tray of food." Midoriya smiled slightly and nodded before following Ace to lunch rush. Four students looked at each other and nodded, before walking out of the cafeteria. Monoma panted heavily as he leaned against the wall. Fear gripped his entire being before feeling a smaller killer intent as he saw several people walk towards him. It was Hitoshi Shinso, Himiko Teeps, Momo Yaoyorozu, and Shoto Todoroki. "Whatever you want, I already apologized to him." Monoma shouted with a hint of defiance at the four. "You may have apologized, but you still need to learn a lesson on what happens when you attack and humiliate our cinnamon roll." Yaoyorozu hissed with the sight of her fangs in view. Hitoshi brought his fist to his palm and cracked his knuckles. "School's in session, but..." Todoroki glared at the blonde as Himiko had a feral grin on her face. Everyone in Class 1B questioned what happened to Monoma, but all he ever said was, "I fell down some stairs." Before the students even realized it, the week was over and their final exams were over. Thanks to Yaoyorozu and Midoriya offering to tutor everyone, even the lowest scored students such as Ashido and Kaminari managed to get a 90 on their written exams. It was also thanks to Dracula's teachings that allowed everyone to understand just what was being asked of them. However, what everyone was excited and nervous about was their physical exam. Midoriya had doubts because of the structure of the exam. 2 students will go against 1 teacher and they'd have to either make it to the gate, or cuff the teacher. At the base of it, the students were too inexperienced to go up against real pros, even with the weights holding them down. However, Dracula told Midoriya this after the announcement. "That's why you have the option to retreat. If you feel you cannot cuff the teacher, then it's best to retreat." The students were all very nervous to fight their teacher. As of now, Midoriya and his partner, Momo Yaoyorozu were trying to figure out how to combat a teacher they have little to no knowledge of. Yes, they were fighting Dracula. As Midoriya watched the screen, seeing Shoji and Hagakure face off against Snipe, Ivor spoke in his head. Before your fight, I wish to ask you this. Do you like Yaoyorozu? This caused him to blush like crazy, confusing the students inside, but he played it off before whispering. Ivor, this is not the appropriate time to be asking that. If now is not the time, then there won't be any other time. I will ask again, do you like Momo Yaoyorozu? Midoriya was silent as he thought it over. He greatly enjoyed his time with Yaoyorozu during the tutoring, and the time in the hospital was rather heartwarming. Why yeah. I do. Then perhaps you should ask her out on a date before your exam happens. Ivor suggested, which made Midoriya a bit worried. What? What makes you think she would say yes? You never know unless you ask. Besides, judging by her behavior patterns around her, she clearly feels the same way. Ivor stated. This caused Midoriya to blink and whisper, she likes me. Correct. Based on my research, she clearly holds you to a high regard. That is why I am suggesting you ask her before your exam begins. Midoriya was silent and turned his head to the slightly taller woman before asking, why Yaoyorozu? She turned her head to look at him. Yes, Midoriya. See, can I ask you something? Yes, of course. I in private? Yaoyorozu couldn't help but blush while Ida looked at the two with a nearly scandalous look. Tsu tilted her head and made a little ribbit noise. The two walked out to the hallway while Recovery Girl watched them. Ah, kids. Young love, as Midnight would say. Midoriya looked nervous and his body was shaking while Yaoyorozu looked at him, uncertain of what exactly was wrong. Midoriya. He jumped a bit and looked at her, remembering why he brought her out in private. Sorry, just nervous. Why yes. So am I. We're going up against our own teacher. Whom we've never seen use his power before, so we'll be going in completely blind. Yaoyorozu stared at him. Did you just make a joke about your condition? I think I did. He rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. But enough about that. What I wanted to ask was. He was silent before looking at her and asking, would you like to go out with me after our final exam? Yaoyorozu was certainly surprised, and if her body could still work, she would have blushed, but nothing happened. Midoriya, fearing he overstepped, backed away and bowed low. Please forgive me for asking such a question. Oh no. It's not that. I'm just surprised. I never knew you wanted to do that. I'd love to go out with you. Yaoyorozu had a beaming smile on her face which matched Midoriya's. Kirishima and Hitoshi's match against Cementos was interesting. While many thought Kirishima would simply punch his way through the slabs of concrete and tire himself out, they were surprised to see them dodging and moving past them. Occasionally Kirishima had to punch through a slab or two, but for the most part, they maneuvered around until Hitoshi got a clear shot at Cementos and goaded him into replying to his response. Hitoshi ordered him to stop using his quirk and Kirishima slapped the cuffs onto him. Ashido cheered for her friend while everyone congratulated them. Team A has passed the exam. The next match was Tsuyu Azui and Fumikichi Tokoyami vs Ectoplasm. What made the exam interesting was the clear communication between them, as well as their mobility to move around. By the end, Tokoyami's quirk Dark Shadow gave them the win. Team B has passed the exam. The third match was Tenya Ida and Ojiro Mashireo vs Power Loader. While Power Loader had control over the terrain thanks to his mech suit, Ida knew they'd have to launch themselves over the gate. With Ida's Recipro burst and the strength of Ojiro's tail, the two landed at the gate, winning the exam. Team C has passed the exam. The fourth match was between Achako Uraraka and Yuga Aoyama vs 13. Right off the bat, it seemed like 13 had them in a tight corner. Her black hole quirk made mobility impossible. That was until Achako blushed, letting go of the railing that was keeping her from being sucked in. This caused 13 to stop her quirk, giving Uraraka the perfect opportunity to cuff the space hero. Team D has passed the exam. The next match was surely a one-sided fight. Mina Ashido and Kaminari against Principal Nizu. The setting filled with pipes and industrial equipment surely made visibility near zero. The two walked around until hearing strange rattling, making Mina look up only to see broken pipes. Kaminari ran while Mina moved to try and see where Nizu was. Lo and behold, the chimera was in a wrecking ball. Kaminari kept running into dead ends, before Mina grabbed his hand and began running towards the only spot Nit ruined. They both made it through the gate and Nizu was rather proud of them, specifically Ashido for finding the spot not destroyed. Team E has passed the exam. Next, was Kyuka Jiro and Himiko Teeps vs Present Mike. This would mark the first time everyone saw Himiko's costume. It consisted of a black jacket with spikes on the shoulders, a red shirt, a tactical vest with multiple knives and daggers, with thigh-high socks and black tactical boots. On her back was canisters and needles connected to them. The disadvantage the students were at immediately was Mick's loud voice. It kept Jiro down when she tried to move. Himiko suggested she use her sonic boots to stop his attack before moving onward. Himiko managed to acquire a bit of her adoptive father's BLD, so it would only last for 5 minutes. They just needed to get close enough for Himiko to flank him and trick him. Himiko was encased in gray slime before materializing into a perfect replica of Dracula. He got behind Present Mike and spoke to him, telling him to tone down, or he risks injuring Jiro. Present Mike knew something wasn't right, but before he could do anything, Dracula slapped the HNDCFFS on Present Mike, ending the exam. Dracula dissolved back into Himiko, clothes still on, freaking the radio hero out. Team F has passed the exam. Next was Mizo Shoji and Toru Hagakure vs Snipe. Snipe's bullet trajectory was unfathomable and unpredictable. It made it hard for the students to get close, as they were backed up against a pillar that was being chipped away by the bullets. That was until Snipe sent out 2 smoke grenades to try and prohibit their sight. Shoji tried to come up with a plan, but when he saw Hagakure's gloves and boots left on the floor, he knew exactly what to do. The multi-armed hero stepped out and rose his arms in surrender. Snipe stepped out, aiming his revolver at Shoji, and before a floating pair of HNDCFFS managed to cuff around the wrist that held his firearm. Snipe, being surprised, accidentally elbowed Hagakure's BRST, making her accuse him of being a pervert and Snipe panicking while denying the accusations. Team G has passes the exam. The next match was Hanta Zero and Scarlet Red vs Midnight. Like Himiko, this was the first time the class saw Scarlet in her costume. She wore a white dress that stopped at her calves. It was similar to a toga from Greece. With breastplate armor, boots and arm bracers, she was similar to a Greek goddess. There was also the skin and mane of a lion strapped to her shoulders, and a necklace with various animal teeth and claws, such as a great white shark tooth, a wolf's claw, a harpy eagle claw, and finally a lion's tooth. She truly lived up to her name of animal goddess. Zero and Scarlet were left in a rocky field and kept on their guard when suddenly Midnight appeared behind Zero and used her gas to put him to sleep. Scarlet turned around before using her quirk to summon an octopus tentacles to pull herself away from the gas. Midnight licked her lips as she whipped her 9 tails at Scarlet, who caught it before being pulled towards the teacher. The redhead student growled as she dug her heels into the ground. Midnight smirked, "I love it when they resist." Scarlet grinded her teeth together before replying, "Allure tu Miras." A black crow with red tribal tattoos escaped from Scarlet's back and flew out towards Midnight and started pecking at her hair, making her lose focus and let go of her 9-tailed WHP to swipe away the bird. This gave Scarlet an opening with the cuffs to run forward and slap the cuffs on Midnight, making her seethe at the student for ruining her hair. Team H has passed the exam. The second to last match was Ace Berkeley and Shoto Todoroki vs. All Might. Despite having a quirk that gave him luck, Ace was extremely nervous about fighting All Might. Ace's costume consisted of a white button-up shirt with the collar up, a brown vest, a brown duster coat, a black top hat with bullets strapped to it and various gears glued onto it. Finishing with black dress pants, brown snip-toe boots and armored crips. While he had his cards that were his main weapon, he had a cane with various mechanisms built inside it. Shoto had a costume change as well, with a simple blue jumpsuit, a brown strap vest and white boots. The two entered the fake city and Ace asked, "So mate, what do you believe to be the best course of action?" Clearly All Might is way too powerful, even with those weighted restraints on. "Perhaps we should make our way to the gate," Shoto said as he scanned the city. "Sounds good to, wait, do you hear that?" Ace asked as he crouched slightly and pulled out his cards. While Todoroki rose his left arm and little sparks of flames escaped. That was until a huge gust of wind started to impact the two students, making them go flying, before Ace used his cane and switched the function to grappling and shot the hook into the pavement, keeping them from flying all the way out of the stage. However, Ace's hat flew off. Once the gust of wind was gone, the duo dropped onto the street and looked to the source, seeing All Might looking menacing. "Hello future heroes. Have you come to stop me?" Ace looked at Shoto before shouting, "New plan. Scatter." The hook retracted back into the cane before they split off from the main road. Ace made it into an alley and panted heavily as he pulled out his card and looked at the ace of spades in his hand. He closed his eyes and shifted his plague doctor mask and tightened the strap. "For Jack," he whispered. Shoto made it behind a 4-story building and panted before looking out the side, seeing All Might before looking in the direction of the alley that Ace entered in. The lucky hero held up a hand before counting from 1 to 3. After 3, Ace sprinted out and threw several cards at All Might's, which managed to break concrete, creating a temporary dust cloud as Ace made it to the 4-story building. "Well, what the bloody hell was that?" Ace asked incredulously. "I knew he was powerful, but I didn't think he was that powerful," Shoto said with a shuddering breath. "Okay, another plan, we need at least one person to get through the gate. So another should distract All Might," Ace proposed. "That's a terrible idea, Berkeley," Shoto protested before the building exploded with All Might bursting through. "Got any better ideas?" Ace asked as he backed away while throwing his cards at the hero. "If you intend to fight me, then you'll have to do better than that." All Might grinned as he slammed his fist on the concrete near Ace. Shoto snarled as he summoned a large wall of ice only for it to be destroyed by a backhand. Ace shouted, "Shoto! Go now!" He pulled his cane out and it expanded into the full thing before twisting it and pulled the cane off, revealing a pistol. He pulled the trigger, shooting heavy RBB bullets at All Might. The impact hit him, making him stumble a bit. Ow! That actually hurt. The silver cross of Manchester Cathedral was melted down to make these 13mm, exploding shells. Ace quoted as he continued to shoot at All Might. That was until All Might flicked a finger, blasting Ace away a bit. Shoto sprinted towards the gate only to be grabbed by the ankle and tossed over towards Ace, whom just got back up only to be collided and land on the floor. "Good try, boys. But not enough. 15 minutes have passed." The automated voice spoke. Ace groaned as he got up from the ground along with Shoto. Bits of the leather on the left side of his mask was torn and one of the lens from his mask was broken, exposing his eye. His sclera was BLD red, both no pupil, just his iris, which was glowing green. A bit of green liquid oozed out of the mask and onto the concrete, melting it and leaving a bit of steam. "We're getting our asses kicked, mate." "What now?" Ace asked. "Got anything useful in that cane?" Shoto asked as he wiped some dirt from his cheek. All my bullets are used up, the cards are no good. Wait, I have a weighted net and even some tranquilizer bullets. I've also got a gas canister. Why didn't you use them before? Shoto asked. Well, clearly the tranquilizer won't penetrate his skin. I doubt the weighted net will hold him down. The gas is mainly to disorientate the villain. Seems like our best bet. Use the gas canister, then I'll light it up, then we run for it. Shoto said, to which Ace turned the cane until it was set to the gas canister. He raised the cane and placed it above his arm for stability before shooting at All Might, who caught it in his hand and dropped it. You might as well give up, heroes. You cannot stop me. All Might shouted before getting ready to charge at them. That was until Ace threw one last card past All Might, making him think it was a bad throw. The card bounced off a bus, then a building, before slicing the canister open, releasing the gas. All Might began coughing and pressed his hand to his mouth and nose. Now. Ace sprinted along with Shoto, who made a little spark of flame which caused the gas to ignite. Ace grabbed Shoto by the waist and twisted his cane to the grappling hook setting before shooting at the gate. The hook latched onto the gate before pulling them both past the gate. All Might watched with a grin of pride. Well done, boys. The duo panted heavily as they laid on the ground. I regret everything. Ace panted as Shoto groaned. I'd like to go home. Amen. T-Mai has passed the exam. Midoriya didn't feel right. He felt like a force was pressing down on his chest. Yaoyorozu felt the same, which was why she kept her staff in her hands, rather than compressed at the small of her back. Speaking of her costume, gone was the red suit with a large BRST window. What was replaced was a red catsuit made from parts of her hair, allowing her to use her quirk without needing to show off skin. She also had a cape draped across her shoulders with the collar pulled up, like Dracula's cape. Midoriya? She asked the green-haired boy, who jumped a bit. Why yeah? He asked as he looked at her with a little twitch of his mechanical cat ears. How do you propose we do this? Midoriya looked down and thought. Dracula seemed to value strength and speed, and not much for defense. From what I've been told, perhaps going on the offense would throw him off. Midoriya? Yaoyorozu asked, which broke him out of his muttering. Oh, sorry. It's okay, Midoriya. It sounds like a good idea. Behind us. Eva called out in Midoriya's head, which made him jump forward, just as Dracula bursted through a building and grabbed Midoriya's leg. Surprise! Dracula shouted with a surprisingly dark voice. Almost like a demon. He spun Midoriya around before launching him towards Yaoyorozu, whom caught him. The duo got a good look at their teacher. His long cape was flowing aggressively, as was his long black hair. His eyes burned bright red with his pupils yellow and his sclera and iris BLD red. He snarled, exposing his fangs. Come and show me what you're made of. Yaoyorozu crouched with her staff raised in a fighting position. Midoriya stood up and shook his head to get rid of any kind of dizziness. He looked at the outline of Dracula floating with his hands out. Run! Yaoyorozu shouted as she jumped towards him, using the staff to launch her up. Dracula grabbed Yaoyorozu by her throat and squeezed it gently. He'll die screaming alongside you. Yaoyorozu gripped and clawed at his hand to try and break free. She stared into his burning eyes before thinking of an unconventional way to break free. Her fingernails grew longer, about 5 inches, before screaming as she scratched his face, clawing his eye out. He cried out in pain and let go of her before covering his face with his hand. Yaoyorozu pulled out the HNDCFFS and jumped towards Dracula, only for him to see her with his one good eye and backhand her away. She collided into a wall and blinked from how blurry her vision was. She coughed and tried to stand up only for her arm to be wrapped around someone's shoulder. Come on! Midoriya shouted. She looked up to her left to see his panicked face look at her. "We've got to go." He began to pull her away from the general area and towards the gate, which was about a mile away. Yaoyorozu felt very weak as she could barely walk. "Midoriya," she whispered weakly. It was clear that she was low on blood and felt very hungry. She growled loudly as she bared her fangs. Midoriya looked at her as Eva spoke. "Her blood reserves are low." Midoriya did not hesitate and lowered her onto the sidewalk, right against a building. He pulled up his sleeve, exposing his arm to her. "Drink, Yaoyorozu." Her vision showed Midoriya's blood stream and the rapid heartbeat. She bared her fangs again before sinking her fangs into his arm. He grunted as he flexed his muscles to help the blood flow faster. Her tongue pressed against his skin as she continued to suck on his blood. Midoriya began to feel himself getting weaker and pale, so he pulled away, ripping her fangs out from his arm. She panted heavily as the red in her eyes shined brightly against her onyx eyes. Blood stained her mouth and chin as it dripped down onto the floor. I am so sorry, Midoriya." She looked at the two black holes in his arm that continued to leak blood. No. It's okay." Midoriya shook his head before Yaoyorozu made a roll of bandages emerge from her chest before wrapping his arm up. "What are we going to do, Midoriya?" Yaoyorozu asked as she could feel her confidence begin to die away. "He's strong and fast. Possibly just as fast as All Might. But we can't pin down his exact powers, but we have to assume he has exceptional power. We can't fight him." He shook his head as he looked at her. "Our only hope is to make it through the gate." Yaoyorozu said, to which he nodded. "Eva, where's the gate?" Midoriya asked, to which the British voice answered. "Northwest. Approximately a mile from your current location." "Northwest. A mile from us," Midoriya said to Yaoyorozu, whom pursed her lips. "We have to cause a distraction." Midoriya frowned as he thought about it. "I'll keep him busy. You're faster, you can get to the gate. I can't leave you to fight him alone." Yaoyorozu shook her head as she looked away. "You have to, Yaoyorozu. Or we fail." Midoriya pressed. Yaoyorozu looked at Midoriya before closing her eyes and took a deep breath before opening them again. "Let's do it." The duo stood up before Midoriya climbed up a pipe to the roof of a 2-story building. Yaoyorozu stuck to the alleyways to avoid the sunlight as much as she could. It was good of Dracula to create a new formula of sunblock that allowed them to not be completely burned by the sun. Midoriya stopped as he smelled something burning. 15 minutes have passed. The automatic voice announced. "To your left." Eva informed Midoriya, to which he turned around to see Dracula lunge towards him with his sharp fingers. Midoriya back flipped away before powering up One for All, and sprinted towards him. He knocked his hand back before punching the roof to launch above him. Dracula grabbed his arm and slammed him down. Midoriya groaned as he tried to get up but was too weak, so he collapsed onto the floor. "Nice try. Now where is your partner? Did she flee like the coward she is?" Dracula taunted, his voice reverted back to normal while grabbing his green hair to pull up his head. Midoriya groaned before chuckling. "She's at the gate." Suddenly an alarm rang out, to which Dracula used his vision to see Yaoyorozu pass through the gate. Dracula had a smirk on his face as he picked up Midoriya and jumped down from the building. "You're very scary, you know that?" Midoriya said, to which Dracula chuckled. "I've been told that many times." "Well done you too." "It was all thanks to Yaoyorozu," Midoriya said modestly. "Oh, don't act so modest. You put much work into it," Dracula said before looking at his bandaged arm. He frowned slightly. "She drank from you. It was no question." "Why yeah. I offered it to her," Midoriya said sheepishly. "Well, looks like I'll have to have a talk with her." When the three left the arena, they made it back to the main campus where the student duo were treated for their injuries. Team J has passed the exam. Well done all of you. You all passed. However, Zero, you'll need to take some extra training classes to make sure this doesn't happen again. Dracula announced to his class in front of the other teachers. Midnight looked at Scarlet with a stink eye before Nizu spoke. Now, you all have the week off before your camping trip. Use this time wisely. Please retire your costumes and shower. Have a good summer. Dracula watched his students walk off while his eyes followed Momo and Izuku. They're going on a date this week. Dracula said to Nizu, who looked back. Do you disapprove? Dracula was silent as he remembered his time with Lisa. The agony over her death and what it led to. However, the moments she and him had overpowered that agony. He smiled slightly. No. No, I do not. You're going on a date with Midoriya. Mina exclaimed. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 3. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author The Gentleman with a Mustache on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.